Hi, everyone. I'm really excited today to introduce you to David Howe, who I met through this process of writing my newsletter. And he reached out to me, and I realized in our first conversation we had a lot in common, more than I thought. And so I'm delighted to have him here today to share his story, share some words of wisdom with us, and just give you a chance to meet a really nice guy who I really enjoyed connecting with. David, welcome. I'm excited you're here.
Hi, Melinda. It's so great to be here. Thanks for the opportunity. And I don't know if I got to say this the first time we were kind of corresponding, but thank you so much for just doing this newsletter and podcast. I just think it adds a lot of value to people. And then I also think it's just really courageous that you're doing this at this time. So I just want to say I appreciate that and express my gratitude.
Thank you. I appreciate you saying that. When I first published my first newsletter, it felt so risky and so vulnerable that and it was like, normally we don't talk about like, hey, look at me, everyone, I lost my job. But I was just reflecting on this yesterday that I've met so many amazing people through this process that I never would have met if I had just like not said anything and quietly went about looking for a job. I mean, like, amazing people, including you. So, they always say things are blessings in disguise. And I feel like there's something about this process that to me is actually, what do you call it? Instead of feeling like it's confining, it's more expansive. I guess that's the way I'll put it. So yeah. It's been great.
That's awesome. And I know obviously you're here to interview me, but like,
yes, you're not interviewing me.
I know. Like, I did have a question of like, what made you do it? Right. Especially because like you were right. It was kind of the beginning of this kind of departure process for you and such. So what made you do it? And what made you, was there like a tipping thing that said, okay, I'm just going to post?
Yeah, I think it's two things. I mean, it's a lot, but two things. I mean, one, at a basic level, I felt like I wanted to tell my story and control the narrative. And that sounds weird, but if you don't say anything, then people have to wonder on their own, like, what happened? Like, why is Melinda no longer at this institution, or what's she doing here, or whatever? And I felt like if I just put it out there, not only did I control the narrative, but sometimes when we say what has been unspoken, it takes the power from it. Like, it's less of a big deal to be like, yeah, I lost my job, than if you hold it and you don't tell anyone. It feels like this weight that once you say it, it's not so bad. And then the other part is, deep down, and I've been reflecting on this a lot since I left my job, deep down, like in the end, with all the jobs I've done in my life, I'm a helper. And so whether I'm a psychologist or working in student affairs, like, I want to help people. And there's something about sharing my story that has, I think, been helpful for people. And it's always very gratifying when I hear people say, oh, I'm so glad you wrote about this. I've been feeling this way too. Like, like, that's really satisfying to me. So yeah, so that's what I decided to do, but it was tough. So, but I'm getting greatly rewarded for my initial angst about doing this.
I'm so glad you did. We wouldn't have met, right?
We never would have met. Yes. Yes. So yeah. So David, what's your story? Like, I know your story, but if you want to share with people watching this, like, what's your story and what made you reach out to me?
Yeah. Well, I've always been interested in how kind of like careers work, and in part because I've had just an interesting career where the kind of when I was an undergrad at Baylor, I studied, it was business and economics. And then I went up to law school at Boston College. And even before I went to law school, I knew that I loved education, and in particular higher education, probably for many of the same reasons you do, and what brought you into the field as well. So even in the midst of law school, kind of navigated a career change in the midst of it, got a dual degree, and came back to Houston. This is where my in-laws live, and this is where my wife's family is. And so geographically, we loved our time up there. We knew we wanted to come back to Texas, in particular to Houston. So that kind of began a parallel, search for me at the time of, on one end, searching and taking the bar, studying for the bar exam, and having some options to practice law, but really knowing and having the privilege to know that what I really wanted to do was spend my time in higher education.
Mm.
So, uh, though it was, that was probably the first time I just really, the I'd say round one of really trying to figure out what is my career going to look like. And I'm not sure. I have some ideas. We'll see kind of how these things
Mhm.
shake out. And so I ended up at a local institution for 9 years. I actually left
Mm.
as the dean of student success, advising the was kind of an inaugural position and team that I got to kind of create and build. So that was just fascinating and interesting. And then after that, I had the opportunity to work at another local university at essentially the chief student affairs and student success officer. So fast forward, was recruited to become the head of school at a classical school, local here. And, as it progressed and such, right, like later on, that led to just essentially, within a smaller, kind of a little bit earlier than I thought. I thought I would be at that role for just a long time. That season
Mhm.
was much shorter. And
Mm.
it actually looped back to the first part of 15 years ago of kind of trying to figure out, do I do higher ed, do I do law? It was
Mhm.
actually one of the first times in a long time that I had to kind of figure out, navigate,
Mhm.
golly, I don't know exactly where I'm going yet. And
Mhm.
that was just unfamiliar territory because I had known for the last decade and a half.
Mhm.
So I was looking for, well, there might have been opportunities in higher education, and there were opportunities. That's probably what I thought initially. I was like, well, that's probably the front runner. But
Yeah.
also, I've now gotten experiences where I can do a variety of different things. I've kind of
Mhm.
learned interesting things about myself, and in
Mhm.
particular that I enjoy and I'm good at fundraising. So I could do every almost every organization needs that in some capacity.
Mhm.
I could do right kind of independent school K through 12 again, and I also looked at some other areas too. I looked at I've always been fascinated with how careers work, and so that's how kind of you and I got connected. I
Yeah.
was like, oh wow, just listening to your podcast, and I knew one of your kind of previous guests on it. So I was
Mhm.
like, oh, that is so fascinating. I was like, golly, I'd love to have a conversation with Melinda. So just to ping back to that kind of story, right? Most of my time has been in education, almost the
Mhm.
entirety of 15 years full time and more if you include the years before that. The but what I kind of realized was also like, my goodness, we've been in Houston for a long time. Families here, we're really
Mhm.
happy here, and most of the job opportunities I had required me relocating, which I just
Yeah.
simply didn't want to do.
Mhm.
So we were fortunate where we just had a little more time, right? Dual income family, and I was able to do some side consulting that I'd done before,
Mhm.
including some career coaching, while trying to figure out what the next kind of chapter was going to be.
Mhm.
And so once I recognized, there was a moment when I recognized, oh my gosh, we are really dedicated to being in Houston.
Ooh, that became your priority
That's
is
right. I was like,
staying
I have to
local.
kind of reorient my
Mhm.
job search based upon this. I knew this, but it wasn't until it was, I was asked by just a mentor who I've like long loved and respected. He's been one of my professional mentors since I was, a student at Baylor. He had a role open and he asked me to apply for it, which would have entailed us, if everything played out according to plan, moving across the country. And it was
Yeah.
really wrestling through that I realized, wow, we really want to stay here.
Mhm.
Like, I better come up with an alternative plan.
Mhm. Yeah.
That's what spurred on kind of looking in parallel. I mean, I already have my law degree. I had gone in active, which basically just means I'm not practicing law.
Mhm.
So I was like, well, I could do something in law. I've always thought about kind of wealth management. I have a lot of kind of contacts in the wealth management space. It's something I thought of entertaining when I was kind of later on in my career. It's like, let's explore this.
Mm-hmm.
So essentially that led me to have a kind of a listening and learning tour of some contacts where we're fortunate, where we're well connected, my wife and I, in the city, and
Mm-hmm.
we just had a lot of contacts in that space, even though it's not my field. So I just met with them. I was like, hey, I'm thinking about this, as
Mm-hmm.
trying to figure out exactly what the next kind of career chapter for me looks like. um,
Mm-hmm.
and I just have some of your time. And
Yeah.
I did a series of those, and I asked them for contacts they had in the field that they
Mm-hmm.
could refer me to. And so I figured out of that would come my next job.
Yeah.
And it did, just not from the source I expected, actually.
Mm.
It was the source my current employer, Cove Wealth Management, is owned by, so the owners are individuals I've known for probably about 15 years. And when I met with one of the owners, Corey, it really was just to learn about the field and kind of figure out, like, hey, please tell me how it actually is, what the work actually is, and then refer me to some of your friends, right? And
Mm-hmm.
then and that's exactly what we did. We had a great conversation. He referred me to some people, and I met with those individuals. And about 2 weeks after that, I got a recruiting call from his wife, the co-owner of the company. And she just said, we have an opportunity. We want to create a position.
Mm.
So that's how I ended up in a different industry.
Yeah. Well, David, that's funny because I think that's your story about where you ended up in your current role and in a different industry is like, I don't know if it would be like everyone's secret fantasy when they network or just like the networking dream, but it's like anyone listening to this with networking is what? You mean you just went around and talked to someone and sooner or later you met someone who was like, hey, we're going to make a job for you. But
Mm-hmm.
that's your story, which I
Yeah,
think is
right.
like wild. Like if you
I,
think about it, like,
no,
but
Melinda, I agree, because I had read why I was inclined to do this, because I had read about it, right?
mm,
And like, there's some individuals I follow on LinkedIn that I feel like really know what they're talking about.
mhm,
And one person was talking about, like, look, this is how you'll find your next role, by having
yeah,
these kind of like listening and learning tours. I was like, really? That intuitively kind of makes sense. I've
mhm,
never had to do something quite like that, right?
yeah,
But let me do that. And so, yeah, it was fun. It gave me so much info. It gave me, I met some people I hadn't ever met.
mhm,
I reconnected with individuals that I hadn't reconnected with for a long time.
mhm,
And it really, not that every case is going to be like this, but it really, when I kind of made that mental shift, and this is, I think, one kind of mindsets are important, and also kind of
mm,
figuring out your anchor values are important. Once we figure it
mm,
out, we want to
yeah,
stay here. I was like, okay, that helps focus me, right?
mhm,
Because
yeah,
before it's like this, wow, what could it be? And you have to entertain all these things. And I found that actually to be one of the hardest pieces, kind of closing off options.
mhm,
So when we had our
yeah,
filters for decision making, once we had that figured out, then I felt like that accelerated everything. I could go with further confidence,
mhm.
and it kind of forced me to be looking in a relatively new lane that I had never
Mhm.
looked at before.
Yeah. Yeah. And I can see that because I think when you're looking for a job, what's that saying? Cast a wide net. Like you want to cast a wide net, but it's also helpful to know what's going to work for you and not work for you. And I've struggled with that, the location bound over
Mm-hmm.
the years. There's been things that have come up and I've really struggled with, oh, could I make this work or whatever? But like, I feel like I've just resigned myself. And I don't know if resigned is the right word, but maybe it is to the fact that this is where I am, and that's
Mm-hmm.
not going to change in the near future. And yeah, I got to move with that. So
Yeah.
yeah, it sounds like once you realized you were staying in the Houston area, that you were all in that area, and
That,
so it allowed
yeah.
you to maybe do. And I don't know if you'd say this is true, but you think of depth and breadth, like with your networking you were able to do more depth within
That's
that area
right.
than if you were like, I'll go anywhere in the country, which would be more dispersing your energies, if that makes sense.
A
Like
hundred
you could meet 20
percent.
people, but if they're all over, like that network's a little different, I guess.
It's so true. And then
Yeah.
exactly what you said, Melinda, it provided me with focus. Like,
Mm,
this is what I'm going to zone in on. And I could say it with confidence because I knew that that was going to be our key anchor, right? I was like, this is what we are choosing, and this is what we are going to make work.
mhm.
So I think it's sometimes when, well, I mean, it's the same thing as I think overall decision making in ambiguity, unless you have kind of a compass, it's just easy to take the frozen approach, right? It's like, well,
Mhm.
I'm not entirely sure. And what
Yeah.
this did was allow me to say, yep, this is exactly how we're
Mhm.
looking at it. I can filter out virtually every single thing that
Mhm.
doesn't match this filter. So getting that filter right was
Yep.
key, but I didn't even realize how much I needed it until it
Yeah.
happened.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. It was something that maybe, I mean, it was a choice for you, but it was a limiting choice that ended up not being limiting
Yeah.
at all. But also I
Isn't that
wonder, like,
interesting?
it is interesting that it actually gave you even more than you would expect from
Hmm.
that. And I think that's a helpful takeaway because I think regardless of what that filter is, that many people have filters in their job searches. And it might be not location, but it might be income level. Like I can't afford to look at jobs below a certain range. And that's a filter. Or I I can't even think of an example.
Or like, or
But you know
I've
what I mean? We
always
all
wanted
have
to do
filters.
this, or I have the skills for this, but
Mhm.
because I haven't done this job exactly like it, how will others see it, right? Like
Mhm.
I think that's another almost self-imposed limitation we
Yeah.
put on ourselves. Uh,
Mhm.
like, well, I don't know, no one, I'm not confident in this, so therefore I'm always, like it's easy to look at like trying to get external validation.
Mhm.
And if you don't have it, you're like, well, okay, let me just shy away from it. But like even
Yeah,
that can be almost kind of a barrier to pursuing something
right.
that you probably should be pursuing.
Well, it's funny as you were saying that, like, because that's like, how do I say this? Like, we have the filters that may narrow it for us. So for you and I, we both have a geographic filter, but
Right.
yet there was another part of your search that you were unfiltered in, and that
Hmm.
was saying you weren't thinking, I will only go back to a job in education because you worked in higher ed and then the K through 12. And
Hmm.
you hadn't been, as far as I know, practicing as an attorney, but like you sort of cast that net wide, the one that you had some flexibility with, and you ended up in a role that was not like the roles you've been in to date.
Right. 100%. And sometimes I think you have to pursue some of those things. The
Mhm.
um the ones that like aren't as obvious, but others might not know, but would
Right.
be a good fit. For example, like I shared with you earlier that during part of this time I was doing some career coaching just because I've literally done this for life. I've hired probably, I don't know, under 100 people, right? I've
Mhm.
interviewed hundreds, and I've helped people informally and formally find their role. So that led me to having some conversations with
Mhm.
search firms and education to see if that's something I could even pursue. I was like, look, I, I'm, I'm pretty skilled at this.
Mhm.
I enjoy it. That turned out not to be obviously where I ended up, but even
Yeah.
having that openness, I think, and kind of taking a few steps to really explore it, though it's
Mhm.
something that I'd never done previously, that was just really, really helpful in the
Yeah.
search itself.
Yeah. And I'm thinking, and again, like even with your networking process, going back to the idea that you got a job directly from your networking process, one thing you did was you didn't limit your networking just to the fields you worked in, into the
Yeah,
education field. Obviously, you expanded it beyond that. So you saw some value in talking to people who weren't in what had historically been your career field.
Mm-hmm.
And so you were intentional on that end. Somehow you ended up connecting with all these other people in a different type of work. Is there
Absolutely.
anything else? Like, I'm thinking of the networking and getting a job through networking. And I know people watching this, like, who are looking for jobs, or again, they're like, I want to know more about that. Like,
Yeah.
do you feel like during that process that there was something that you did that, I mean, obviously, other than like being yourself and demonstrating your skills, and they're like, oh, we want David as part of our company, but like, what do you think you did that helped put you in a position where you could get a job that way? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I think just being really, you know, I, there's this process, right? Like I kind of boiled it down to, and really the first part is going to be like it has to be starting with mindset. You have to see your like the situation for what it is. So it's like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
if I'm in transition, what
Mm-hmm.
this means is that, you know, like and I think anyone who goes through it is asking these questions like, well, there's likely a moment where maybe moments people are asking, will I ever find the right role again? And the
Yeah.
answer is like,
Yeah.
yes, of course you will, right? You just don't know exactly what that's going to look like. You just have to realize that it's just a moment in time in a new chapter that you're walking through. And to
Mm-hmm.
go with the analogy of the chapter, if like you going through the search, you don't know if the job search is going to be the equivalent of a couple sentences, a full paragraph, pages. You
Yeah.
don't
Yeah.
know. But you do know that it's a contained chapter at some point, right? You're
Yeah.
going to find where you land, where you're supposed to be, even if it's a bit of a surprise than what you planned. But
Mm-hmm.
I would say the first part is like being mindful of the context you're in. And then the second piece is you have to remind yourself who you are and who you want to become and what
Mm.
you're good at.
Yeah.
It's just so easy to kind of forget those things.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why whenever I've met on the formal kind of job career coaching sessions, the paid sessions I have with some of my clients on the side, I always have them take some inventories, the ones that you likely know. So the free one is 16personalities.com.
Mm. Yeah.
Myers-Briggs, big fan. Spent some time doing that. Then there's the Clifton Strengths, and
Mm-hmm.
doing the full version of it is about $60, where you get all your 30 some strengths. So I think that's a great reminder as well.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, here are the things I'm really good at. And it's a reminder first and foremost to yourself so that you can express these to others. And then the third one is one I never heard of before, but recently got kind of exposed to. It's called the Colby A Index. It
Mm.
just breaks down some kind of different categories, somewhat similar to strength
Mhm,
finders, but I think just easier for people to apply,
mhm.
especially to kind of gives them talking points during the job search and such. So that's kind of figuring out like, right, reminder who you are, the journey you're on, who you want to become, and what you're good at.
Yeah,
And then we
yeah,
began, this kind of the interview talking about stories and
yeah.
sharing your stories. And that's actually a big part of what I tell a lot of clients. It's you've got to start telling yourself the right story. And here's where I want you to focus on. Now that you've done this strength quest stuff,
Mhm,
I want you to meet with a handful of individuals who have known you and you trust, and I want you to ask them, tell them that like, right, the your career kind of coach is assigning you homework to do this, because
mhm.
it may feel like something you're not used to doing before. You want to
Yeah.
ask them this: when have you seen me at my best?
Mm,
And then you meet with these individuals, you just ask that question, right? Like you tell them why you're asking it, right? And then you let them tell you it. And then after some of these, you see if there's any commonalities. You're like,
mhm,
okay, let me, and then you tell yourself that story, right? It's
mhm.
all strength based focus.
Yeah,
And so then you practice it. You're like, okay, this is going to be now how you're going to tell yourself the story about you at this
Yeah.
time. So it's getting that story right.
Mm.
And when you get that story, and it's not that it's like 100% done. It's just that it's just so easy to be telling yourself a negative story, a bad story,
Yeah.
a right, what a fill in the blank type of story,
Mhm.
especially during times like this. So it is essential to have kind of like that right, strength-based,
Mhm.
optimistic, right? Like it's a hopeful filled story.
Yeah.
So that you're in the right mindset. You have like kind of
Yeah.
right. And then from there, it's about telling that story to people and
Mhm.
asking them for their time. Like I'm so like there were the best places to start with your network. That's the easiest way to do
Mhm.
it. But I did contact some individuals who
Mhm.
were outside of my network, and the actual rates of those just is going to be lower as you might
Mhm.
expect,
Yeah.
but at the same time, kind of also sometimes higher than you think too.
Mhm.
For
Yeah.
willing, just like yeah, absolutely, right. If you can give them the reason behind it, and that's the
Yeah.
key, right.
Mhm.
So for me, it went something like this. I'm exploring, essentially, I'm looking at, this field because I
Yeah.
think professionally, I have just, a lot of great skills that will help me succeed in this role, in this field. And this seems like you seem to have the type of role that I'd be interested in learning more about.
Mm.
Have some more
Mhm.
time, right? Gonna have a Zoom or a call, or right, if,
Yeah.
if I know you and you're local, can we just grab coffee sometime? I love to learn about this.
Yeah.
And then you ask them about their story and you're just super
Mhm.
curious about it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then in doing so, you can kind of figure out and answer some questions like, and for me, that was key, especially if I'm looking at a new field of wealth management. Am
Mhm.
I resonating with what they're saying?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Like, how am I connecting with this?
Yeah.
And can I see myself doing this type of role?
Mhm.
And I asked them why they enjoyed their jobs and all those things. So you're doing a reverse interview, right? You're not trying to get a
Mhm.
job. You are literally interviewing them about their current role
Yeah.
and see how you react to that. If it's kind of like,
Mhm.
that's interesting, but boy, no, thank you. That's
Yeah.
great. That's info, right?
Right. Right.
But in
That's
my
good
case,
info.
that's, yeah, it's good info. In my instances, there were two key kind of moments of like when both individuals, one who I had known for a long time, another one who was a referral from my network. But these two individuals provided a snapshot. I was like, wow, that really resonated with me. In
Mm.
particular, one of them, he's been, he's been in the wealth management space for probably about 30 years. I just asked him, his name's Fred, and I asked Fred, like, you really seem to love your job,
Mm.
right? Why do you love your job so much? And his response was just something I wouldn't have expected. And it was this. It was something said of, it's like, well, in some professions, maybe most professions, you get to know your clients this much.
Mhm.
In my field, I get to see all of them and I get to
Mm.
serve them. I'm like, that was just so beautiful and
Mhm.
resonated with so many values, the same values that I have and the same values that, you share, and of why we are kind of what brought us into education. I was
Yeah.
like, that was a critical moment. I was like, I would not have associated that with the wealth management field. Like, isn't this just like managing people's money?
Yeah. Right. I wouldn't have associated with that.
I'm like,
I'd be like, yeah,
yes,
you're talking about money.
but right, but like now it makes sense. I'm in the film. Like, look, if you can start with one of the hardest things, talking
Mhm.
about the purpose of you having a relationship with somebody is to talk about money. Once that's opened, everything else is just
Yeah.
easier to talk about,
Yeah.
right? So anyway,
Yeah.
so it was one of those, that was one of the key moments of like,
Mhm.
and that there was no role that came out of that. But just last week, I actually texted him again. I was like, hey, I just want to like loop back. You were just so helpful in
Mm,
this period of time. I thanked him after I got my role too. I was like, I just
mhm.
love to grab lunch again, right?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it just gives you a perspective and allows you to see, can I see myself in this role? Can I see
Mhm,
a potential story that
mhm.
is cohesive and makes sense
Yeah.
if I were to pursue this? And
Mhm.
naturally out of it, right? Like the surprise from my current employer was like, oh my gosh, like that was a role came out of it. And
Yeah.
that is ultimately the end goal. Um, but you're doing it in such a way that like you're not making that the kind of primary objective. It's just to learn,
Right.
right, and connect with that
Right.
individual and think kind of long term, right.
Mhm.
That was one thing as well. I was like, okay, I got to remind myself all the things that I know and I've told other people to do. When you do these things, right, it's not just like, hey, I need a job right now, right? It's like
Yeah.
this could turn into a long-term opportunity, and just the opportunity being an opportunity to connect with another human being, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
And so I got to know some of these people in far greater depth than I would have otherwise
Mhm.
because of that approach.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I've heard several themes coming through in the idea of, like, first of all, really thinking through your story in a way that you
Mm-hmm.
can share it, in a way that has impact. Like, we can all share our story, but as you talked about, sharing it from a strengths-based lens,
That's right.
um, really understanding it and getting feedback from others about, what do you see me? Where do you see me at my best? Like, I think that's awesome. And so I think that the story, the strengths-based work, that with the networking, I love how it's like you describe it as a reverse interview. That, for
Mm-hmm.
example, with wealth management, how do you know you'd like that field or not until you really learned about what it was other than the job description? Because
Yeah, that's
it
right.
tells us really nothing. I mean, that tells us tasks, but you have tasks at every job, and some of those overlap
Mm-hmm.
regardless of field. And another thing you referenced in passing but didn't dive into, but I know when you and I talked before, we talked more about this, is just um, the role that values play too in this process.
Yeah,
And it sounds like that was something that you threw into your own mix as well, like sort of what's important to you from a values base, what brings you meaning or purpose.
absolutely. That's been essential for like all my jobs. That's
Mhm.
actually part of why I didn't go into law. It's just that I just felt like I needed something with a little bit more tangible. I could see kind of
Mhm.
how it contributed to the greater good. And looking
Yeah.
back, law can do that, but the way
Mhm.
I was looking at it and the type of law I was looking at
Mhm.
probably wouldn't have fulfilled that for me.
Mhm. Yeah.
So kind of knowing of like like the fields for myself and for my wife as well, we've always been big on just kind of the impact, a positive impact and the
Mhm.
purpose that a role has.
Yeah.
And here's what's been interesting. I heard this from I think it was another person in the corporate world previously, that when I first heard it, I was kind of skeptical. They said they had it was actually Sheryl Sandberg, I think,
Mm.
from as far as I know, she's still the CEO of Facebook. But there was this interesting interview with her where she talked about her intentions was to go into kind of like the social services type of profession because she thought that was so purpose driven. And
Yeah.
then she ended up right and doing something different. I forget the role she was in before the Facebook role, but she essentially went into the for-profit sector, and she
Mhm.
talked about how even that, if you have the right culture, can be really purpose driven. And
Mhm.
so I'd first heard that from her, but I was kind of skeptical. I was like, I don't know. That sounds like something she just, she's saying because she has to, because she's a CEO of Facebook. Right?
Right, it sounds made up.
Yeah, it seems like a PR move.
Yeah.
And who knows? I don't know her intentions.
Right.
But what's interesting is that now I'm on the non or the for profit corporate side,
Mhm.
because the company Co-Wealth Management is so kind of is just driven because of purpose, right? As in,
Mhm.
like, we're probably one of the few, if right, few kind of wealth management firms that we actually intentionally give away, a significant portion of our earnings to support local nonprofits.
Mm.
And the reason that was done was because the values of the founders and the
Yeah.
owners. So
Mhm.
to have that type of culture, to have they've built the company in such a way that there is going to be much more work life, I guess, integration, um,
Mhm.
flexibility. That has really been just such a purpose driver that
Mhm.
I just kind of assumed wouldn't be the case for any sort of corporation, maybe
Mhm.
especially for a
Yeah.
wealth management firm.
Yeah.
And though I don't think that is, uh, you know, generally the case,
Mhm.
uh, in our case, it is just an example of like some things that you don't think will be
Right.
possible, they actually are. And
Yeah.
quick random ad too. It's ironic, Belinda. Life is kind of full of interesting surprises and ironies. It took working for a wealth management firm, aka my current role,
Mhm.
for me to actually practice law. So
Yeah.
I'm their general counsel and chief compliance and engagement officer. So this is hilarious to me.
And it is funny how you ended up sort of where you started, but without the intention of ending up there in
That's
terms of
right.
practicing law. Like you started law school and then never practiced until.
Exactly. And I would say I even had a kind of almost a resistance to doing it. So it
Uh-huh.
it, it took this type of role to be like, you know what? I actually enjoy it. That was also a surprise, right? Like
Yeah.
there are parts of the role, every part of the role that you think you'll like.
Mhm.
And the others that you're like, I'm not gonna like this.
Yeah.
Here's what's been interesting, and that I shared with our firm president, Sarah. I said, one of the most there's been a lot of really great pleasant pieces of the role, but one of the most pleasant surprises was that I found I actually enjoy the practice of law.
Mm.
What i what i misdiagnosed before was thinking that, and I wouldn't have wanted to work probably at, like, just the grind of big law.
Mhm.
It is just a grind.
Yeah.
And so that type of culture I don't think I would have enjoyed. But I think
Mhm.
I over projected and just had the sense of, this is every law practice has got to be like this, right?
Mhm.
So therefore, maybe it's not a good fit for me.
Yeah.
But yeah, just here I
Well,
am actually enjoying
yeah.
that aspect of the role as well.
Yeah, and it's interesting to think about as we think about values and purpose. Like those exist in all industries in all fields, but you have to really get into like how does it play out in a specific location or in a
Right.
specific role, and also knowing kind of like your strengths, what are your core values and sort of what might be a good fit. And in your case, it sounds like you recognize the industry itself of wealth management wasn't all about just the money. It was about the people that you're
That's
serving.
right.
And you found a company that was also a really good match. And it sounds like in the way they operate, that it was just,
Yeah,
everything came together, but it took a lot of talking to a lot of people to
it
find
did.
them. Yeah.
It really did. And it was just, it was just fun. Like, it really was. Like, I'm the type of individual that likes doing that, but it also took kind of like that push, including
Mhm.
a push from my wife. She's like, "What are you doing? Like, you're great at like working like with people. Like, why aren't
Yeah.
you meeting with people?" I was like,
Mm.
"That's a great point."
Yeah. Good for her.
Right? She's like, "What are you doing?" Even in higher ed, she's like, "What are you doing? You built so many long, like, lasting relationships,
Yeah.
and like, have you contacted those people?"
Mhm.
Like, no.
Yeah.
She's like, well, you need to. I was like, I'm
Yeah.
checking them right after this, right? So it's doing sometimes the things it's just easy to forget when you're in
Yeah.
the midst of it. It's like, oh yeah, what's the most obvious thing, right? I
Mhm.
need to be doing. Uh,
Yeah.
this is the most obvious thing. Let's do that, and everything else that should be like a lower priority.
Mm, yeah. Yeah, and I think that also, like, even with the networking, there's different ways to do the obvious thing, and I
Hmm.
think people always think as networking as, um, like, getting out there and meeting people and being, like, at functions or something, which to me, I'm an introvert, so that's not my scene. Like, I can do it, but I'm always kinda awkward, like, "Hey," but, like, this is easier for me, and so I
100%.
found that every time I meet someone, like, when I met you, I think you gave me names of 3 different people, I think. You're like, "You need to touch with," and I went out after we stopped talking and reached out to people, and it was good, you know what I mean? And I feel like
Yeah,
every time I've connected with someone, it leads me to someone else,
that's
and
right.
so, I think just that process of talking to people, um, for the purpose of learning more about what's going on or just shared interests will take you further and further. It's like this whole ripple effect of
100%.
networking, and
It's a
yeah.
It's 100%, and I really like what you said because that's right. I think there's definitely a place for like just going to places, right?
Mhm.
But I actually think even let's talk about that first. That type of networking, of I'm gonna put myself out there. It's like, well, going to a networking event, I don't know. I actually don't think those are that effective.
Yeah.
People who can randomly hire a stranger, like that seems odd. So it's more likely
Mhm.
like, if you're going to do that, go in some type of circle you already have contacts in,
Mhm.
because you're more likely to run into someone you either hadn't reconnected with
Yeah.
for a while, or someone who's like, okay, you're in a similar circle, right? Or I'd say go volunteer at some place that's kind of local and that you really like. And, even that act is like a better act of networking. So if you're going to do it from the almost like the cold, right? Like,
Mhm.
we think about, cold leads, worm leads, all of those things. That'd be
Yeah.
in the cold bucket. And the worm
Mhm.
leads are going to be those individuals that, like you said, like it's better to spend it where you have some type of tie. So like
Mhm.
even a loose tie, like you and I, even as an example, right? We had a loose tie. It's like, well, we were both in higher education.
Yeah.
You were at Boston College. We didn't overlap, but we had an institutional type of
Mhm.
bond. And
Yeah.
then one of your guests we both knew. So I was like, huh.
Yeah.
So
Yep. Not
those three
wrong.
things were
Yeah.
enough,
Yeah.
right? Like,
Exactly.
okay, this makes sense to at least
Yeah.
initiate some type of conversation. So
Yeah.
I think those same ingredients are going to
Mhm.
apply to when
Yeah.
someone's trying to do that for the purpose of networking to potentially find another role or an individual that can kind of give them insight.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think even if, like, as I'm meeting people, like, I've had wonderful conversations with people and things, like I talked with a woman yesterday, and we just have so much in common, and
Hmm.
on her Substack newsletter, and like I'm benefiting from reading that. Like, even if it doesn't lead to a job, it's like I'm just finding moments of joy and connecting with people. And I know when you and I spoke the first time, like we talked for like a full hour, which I wasn't expecting, but it was just like we just had so much to
That,
say naturally to each other. And I
that's
think
right. And
that's
those
the
are the
point.
people to find, right?
Yeah.
Where it
Yeah.
doesn't feel like you're like, oh my gosh, how do I get out of this conversation?
Right.
Like, that's not going to help you in anything. Like, get
Right.
them for their time and exit from that
Yeah.
conversation, right?
Exactly.
But the
Right.
individuals where you're like, wow, it goes back to the values piece,
Yeah.
right? We You and I, we connected well because we share a lot of common values that we
Mhm.
didn't know we shared.
Right. Right.
But
Until we met.
that's
Yeah.
right, until we met, until we dialogued, we're like, we have a lot of common interests.
Hmm.
And so it made it just like easy and feel like natural. And
Yeah.
those are going to be the type of connections you can, like, you know what? I'm definitely, irrespective of how this turns out, I plan to keep in touch with this person, right?
Mhm.
Like you kind of file those things away.
Yeah.
And sometimes those are spontaneous, they
Mm.
kind of, the right conditions are where there's that match. And other times it's just with a little bit of intentionality, you increase the kind of like luck factor behind it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. Like, you all get lucky sometimes the more you put yourself out there. And so, yeah, luck and then the intentionality of what you can control is it's a
Yeah,
powerful
exactly.
combination. Yeah. And yeah.
And
Um, what would you say? Like, I know we've been talking for a while and I'm mindful of your time, but as people are watching this, we spend a lot of time on networking, and then other things about using your strengths. You provided some good tools for people to look at. If people were watching it And as we wrap up, what would you say are a couple of key takeaways that you would hope people would either remember from this call, or maybe you haven't said yet, that you're like, I want you to know this. Like, what are your takeaways that you would want people to know?
I think it's just kind of kind of re-emphasizing something I said earlier, right? Of like, it has to begin with the right mindset. Yeah, you have to keep training your mind.
Yep.
And in particular, for me, during this time, and and during various pieces of my life, there's this one kind of scripture so it's the book of Romans in the Bible, and it says something like this: is Romans 12:2. It says, "Do not be conformed to the patterns of this world, but be renewed by the transformation of your mind." And so that I found to be probably the singular most important thing. And just unpack it a little bit, right? The patterns of this world. Melinda, I don't have to tell people that like there's just so much negativity, right?
Yeah.
Like, a sense of like you get on, the new social media, is like, oh my gosh, this like it's the pattern is that we'll become more negative, cynical, and then look deeper, almost like it'll drive us into ourselves more, right? And then we'll just be sadder because of it.
Yeah.
And so I think that's the pattern. It's like, okay, let's not do that pattern. Let's rather, and I think for you with the counseling background, especially, you probably have even a deeper take on this, but the idea of like transforming your mind. Well, we got to fill our minds with good things.
Yeah.
It's not just the removal of the bad things, the bad habits, right? It's filling your mind with those good things, so that it provides you just an accurate, hopeful story.
Yeah.
That's the singular most actually important thing to preserve. Because without that, all the tactics, right? Like the networking stuff, you simply won't do it.
Yeah.
Or
why bother?
That's right. Or if you do it, it won't work.
Yeah.
Because you're not in a good mind space. So right, there's a lot of different ways. Like, there's obviously like, I'm a big fan of actual therapy, right? I had therapy before, right? Like probably starting a couple of years ago. I just got in the routine of like, okay, these checkups, and it became that much more pressing when I was actually going through just ambiguity and such. So I would say that, like, how do you make sure you preserve kind of that mindset? There's a song I've just come to love. It's probably one of my favorite songs. And so it's called Just Haven't Seen It Yet by Danny Gokey, Gokui.
I'm writing this down, although I could probably get it on the transcript, but just haven't seen it yet.
But why I love it is, I won't read you all the lyrics, but he talks about like, it's like, look, sometimes it's hard to have hope or faith. Right?
Yeah.
And so he begins there, and he talks about, though, however, you got to cling on to those things, because the imagery is of the brightest sunrise waiting on the other side, even when it looks super dark, right? Like on the darkest night. So it's like, okay, you may feel like you're going through like, there's a lot of darkness, right? And that imagery of like, well, what if like climbing a hill and you're just almost there, and you peek over because of your effort, and then at the same time the sun is naturally kind of like rising, so it's like, oh my gosh, and it makes that sunset that much brighter and more beautiful because of some of the darkness you've been seeing and you're stuck in. So I think of that song and things like that, of making sure you fill your mind, and then build yourself a board of just supporters, right? Like, and some people that they're in your corner, because they've been in your corner for a long time. Golly, get on a rotation where you can talk with not just one, so it doesn't like, right? You don't want to like put all your eggs in one basket, but a handful of these individuals where sometimes you're talking about, right, kind of what's going on with your job search, and sometimes it's just to like catch up and talk about life. And
Yeah.
that's going to bring back a sense of joy. That's going to help you figure out like, okay, this is, this is what's actually important. I'm going to get that job. It's maybe it's closer than I even think it may be, right? I just don't see it yet. And so having that close proximity of individuals, and that's part of what I was able to do, right? I was like, I reconnected with some old friends. I'm like, yeah, this is what happened.
Yeah.
And, like, this is where I am. And it was just fun to catch up. And so building intentionally that kind of board of supporters for yourself be so, so helpful.
Yeah.
So I would say those are actually there's a lot of tips and tricks of like how to maximize, like, whether like, your LinkedIn profile, your resume, those are all important things. But I think the singular most important thing is the mindset and getting your story, right? And then telling that news story, just like this journey has been for you of this newsletter. Is like, okay, I get to tell my story, right?
Yeah.
The story that I tell, not a version that like that others are telling, and it's not a version that like it's like, oh gosh, if I'm as a default, it just may go kind of like negative, right? It's positive, strength-based, hope-filled, faith-filled story.
Yeah. And that's
that.
Yeah, because that's your truth. Like, if you think about it, like, my story is my truth. And so if someone doesn't hear that, like, they may think, oh, poor Melinda, her job was eliminated. And that was unfortunate. And I was really upset. But right now, like, I'm feeling pretty good. Like, even though I don't have a job right now, but still, like, my truth is not like, this is a disaster. My truth is one that has hope and is kind of excited about what could be next. And so I think your story and holding that from a positive mindset and speaking, or I guess knowing what your truth is, can go a long way.
100%. And just pegging to that, Melinda, because it parallels what I experienced, right? I think about the idea of transformation. Like, this is what this opportunity is, because, right? Whether you chose it or not, whether it's a surprise or not, having a set of time when we don't know what our next role is, that's hard. It doesn't matter under what conditions it happened, just by itself. And so very few things, I think, force us to really kind of confront things that, it's just easy to shelf, like questions about identity and all those pieces that go with it, right? So I think the possibility and opportunity for any listener who's going through this is to realize this is your opportunity for transformation, not just like a little bit of change, right? There's no guarantee of this, but this is the opportunity to do it. Because similar to what you were saying, Melinda, right? It's about like, I felt like I was really starting to get such a great sense of confidence and identity before I figured out and landed this role. That is the key, because that's internal, not just like, right? Anyone feels pretty good. It's like, hey, I succeeded, right? I got myself, I found myself a new role and, good role in a new field. Wow, look at me, right? Of course, that's going to build confidence, but that's external. And I think the work is find the ability and do the work of transformation so that before you've arrived, right, at whatever the next thing is. If you can do that, that is success.
I am going to stop there because that is so powerful. Like, we're done.
Boom.
I'm going to end it right there, David. Like, that's true. Do the work of transformation now and not expecting the success of getting a job to transform you.
That's right.
Now, and you've talked a lot about that process through this conversation. And David, this has been so wonderful. I really appreciate us connecting and the people you gave me to connect with, one of whom I had a great conversation with. I'll fill you in later. But
that's awesome.
But this has been wonderful. And you are someone who I hope will remain in my network beyond this. It's been
Hey,
great to really get to know you through this process. So
well,
thank you so much.
thank
And
you.
um, if anyone was interested in connecting with you at all, would they find you on LinkedIn? Like, would that be a good way to?
Yeah, absolutely. LinkedIn's great. You know, I'm pretty active on that. It's the only I've cut out essentially all other social media platforms
Mm,
because they were just, I was like, this is not positive for my life.
yeah,
Right?
yeah.
Like, this is not helpful. So
Mhm.
I like LinkedIn. So
Okay.
LinkedIn, you know, that they can always feel free to email me, you know, that david.q.how, HAO, at gmail.com. And if they just have a question, right, of like, of I don't know, something that was helpful and that I tried or whatever it is, I'm happy to spend some time just to, whether it's on a LinkedIn message or, you know, I've done this with people, even getting on a phone call, brief phone call. I'm like,
Yeah,
hey, you
yeah,
know, after some messages and they still had some questions, happy to help just because
yeah,
it's, you know, it's part of the beauty of it all, right?
yeah.
And again, thank you for doing this newsletter and podcast.
You're
It's been
welcome.
so much fun.
Oh, well, thank you, David. And thank you, everyone, for watching this. And I will also include in the newsletter your contact information. So you may be getting a
Awesome.
flurry of activity. Thank you, David.
Love it.
And goodbye, everyone, for now. Thanks.
Take care. Bye.